family, and that there was no situation that could be so bad that they couldn't talk to mum and dad. But Jack, we won't take what you're going to talk about tonight and tell them all about it, because that's what you're doing.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the President and everyone here, Margaret, for inviting us along tonight. It's certainly a privilege to be here. And first of all, I'd like to put us to put on our coat of many colours, because that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Each colour represents a different function according to what we do of suicide prevention. Okay, we'll just put that down there. Okay, the New Zealand Suicide Prevention Trust, we run a counselling helpline 24/7, and we advertise in the yellow pages. And the way we interact with one another affects the mental health of those around us, our own families and everything. And we like to encourage people to be there for one another within our society, because our society is crumbling and we want to get back to better social networks. Okay, we have a certificate of completion for training for people, first of all. And I've already given a number of presentations at the Wananga to social workers, done a presentation at Mata, Te Akau, okay, and we're training people up to be the healed healers and people to be the exemplary models in our society. Okay, and I was wrapped over the knuckles before because I used the word elderly and I shouldn't have used it. So I'm going to say wise owls. And I've met many wise owls here this evening. Okay, so we'll start with our PowerPoint. Next.
You see it, Lewis?
Could I get a bit closer?
Celebrating life, because we like to keep a positive focus. Suicide prevention, action plan for solace whanau support groups. Providing an intervention, prevention and postvention model. So you've got prevention, stopping people taking their lives. Postvention deals with people after the fact, when they've lost someone, to comfort them, be there for them, and set up a whanau support group. And we're starting to do that for people who've lost loved ones to suicide. Next. Okay, on the average there are 546 reported deaths by suicide per year, 3,699 attempted suicide. So there's 10 times as many people who attempt it as those that actually do take their lives. People aged between 35 to 45 years had the highest suicide death rate. Now a lot of people think it's just young people. It's probably between 80 to 100 young people, but it's 400 people, that age group, the older age group, and it's probably about 200 people between 55 and 70. So there's a lot of older people, wise owls, taking their lives also. And therefore suicide prevention has become everyone's business today in terms of families. Not a family hasn't been, every family's been touched by one way or another, with cousins and so forth. Okay, now males have a significantly higher, take it back, yep. Males have a significantly higher rate of death by suicide than females, by 3 times as many. We need the woman to understand that the males are a dying race. And stand by your men, ladies.
Sorry, saying that and attempted suicide, is there a correlation that perhaps the men are more successful? I don't mean that.
They are more successful, definitely. Because when a man goes to end his life, he goes all the way. Quite often, woman, it's a cry for attempt. It might be just pills, okay. It might be swallowing some liquid or whatever. But the males generally go the whole way, and they mean business, okay. Now, Maori deaths from the suicide account for 20% of all suicide deaths. So out of the 350, you're probably looking about 60, 70 male Maori people take their lives a year. which is pretty horrific. It means our own people are dying. Asian people and overseas people that come here, they have better social networks, but for some reason our own people in our own country are at risk. The farmers is a very high risk rate. I just had the other day a nurse rang me up concerned because someone who had had a pregnancy and went through postnatal depression had taken their lives, so she was interested in support groups there. So the coroners need to release statistics on cluster groups, what groups are effective and what we can do about those groups. So we haven't come very far in terms of suicide prevention in this country, I'm afraid. It's a top-heavy shuffling paper and so forth, but we like to bring it to a grassroots level. Okay, next. Okay, our objectives are to provide a neutral place and a grassroots response for those affected without any interference from others. A neutral place meaning those who have lost loved ones. It's obviously a very sensitive matter, and it hits the raw nerves when people have lost loved ones. So we like to provide a neutral place and be very sensitive to those people. So while we have professional people involved, they need to realise it's about people who have lost loved ones to suicide, and it's about helping them. To provide a top-down, bottom-up approach to reducing suicide, it's not only about shuffling paper, about working with agencies, it's dealing with real statistics at a grassroots level. It's hands-on with those who are attempting suicide, those who have lost loved ones. We need to have lifelines in place to those people. So we challenge government quite often with our suicide petition, skeleton petition. We had it going for males, so we had 3,000 signatures and took it to the government about the male suicide rate in this country and how horrific it was. Yeah, so we want to change things, be fence builders from the top as well as work as practitioners at a grassroots level. Okay, to comfort those who have lost loved ones, pairing them up with each other for the purpose of them comforting each other. So those who have lost loved ones, they understand what it's like. And there are a few people here who have lost loved ones, okay, in the past, younger people and so forth. And other people who have lost loved ones here would understand what you were talking about. And I think in terms of grief facilitation, there's a need for support even for people who have been through it, like, you know, their own personal loved ones. Very important. Okay, to provide a one-stop shop crisis intervention safe place for groups affected by the links to suicide. For example, fathers and mothers, youth affected by drugs and alcohol. Fathers are really affected with the family court system. Probably between 50 and 60 fathers take their lives every year in New Zealand, because they can't get custody to their own children, and because we don't have proper family mediation. We don't reconcile families anymore. We just exclude fathers instead of reconciling them, which is a terrible shame. We need to change legislation. Okay? Next. To provide an alternative health and well-being model using one's higher universal power with a Te Whare Tapawha spiritual, mental, physical and social spheres model. So you've got to have a model, a means of transforming people, so that when you're dealing with suicide and you're dealing with trauma, you have a means of recharging yourself and you follow a model. The Christian model is wonderful. No doubt there are Christian people here, quite a few Christian people. Yes? And also the higher power, the AA model is a good one, trusting in your higher power. We all have a spirit and a wairua, and in the Maori context, the walls, we talk about the spiritual, the mental, the physical and the social spheres. And when I was talking to social workers at the Wānanga, we talked about the areas where they were lacking and the areas they needed an improvement on, whether it be spiritual, whether it be in the emotional area. Quite often people have emotional blockage and they need to work through issues. Sometimes it's physical, the physical well-being is at risk. It might be exercise, it might be other areas, social spheres. To provide a forum for youth, which includes community, kaumātua, elders and whānau, to set up tangata wairua expressing matakite, using Maori rituals for spiritual cleansing. Some examples of that is when they see wairua at Waikeria, the tohunga goes in with manuka and he sprinkles them in water. And the Maori people are very sensitive about areas of depression and being separated from families, and quite often they are at risk there. And a caring, nurturing, guiding, mentoring model is another one that the Maori people use too. Okay, to train up leaders and help those affected. You see, we need to train up the trainers. We need, because quite often you see the mindset is in our society, oh, let someone else deal with that. And but now people are starting to realise that we need to equip everyday people in everyday society to be there for one another, and to give people the means by which they can help themselves and in order to help others. Okay, next one. My name's Gielen, Secretary of the New Zealand Suicide Prevention Trust. We've been running for 10 years now, okay, and we have 5 people on our trust board who are responsible for the governance. We have a psychotherapist, a teacher, a counsellor, a fundraiser, and as well as the other people that help us from various groups like the Fathers Coalition and so forth. Okay, I'd just like to say a prayer now, just to officially open. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time of sharing, and we just commit our loved ones into your hands, especially those we have lost. And I just pray if anyone here has lost someone to suicide, Lord Jesus, we just commit them into your hands. And we ask and pray that you would give us sensitivity and understanding of what we're sharing here. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. Okay, next. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. We do operate a speakeasy theatre with an open mic where people generally can come up and they can share their experience, say in buddy support, suicide first aid, or dealing with grief. So it becomes very personal, and they come up and they might share a poem, they might share the loss of their loved one and how they've journeyed through that grief, or whatever the case may be. Okay, next. Okay, we have 12 functions here. I'll just give you a quick overview tonight, because generally 2 of these functions takes me 3 or 4 hours to get through. Okay, next. Okay, the yellow buddy supporter. The buddy supporter depends on higher power and universal spirit to empower them to do the work. So we can all be a buddy supporter. Secondly, they provide friendship and support, befriending the troubled by helping them access specific assistance. So the buddy supporter is just there for other people, a bit like a social network, and I see that operating with the Lions and other clubs where they're getting back to being socially orientated, caring for their brothers and sisters and being there for one another. Okay, puts buddy support system in place for persons at risk. So we have 30 to 40 people that ring up every month, and our job is to identify the key person in that person's life because they're feeling suicidal. And once we do that, you can be assured that person 9 times out of 10 will stay alive. Now, it's not rocket science with suicide prevention, because I've found 90% of the time, once you identify a person's need and provide a buddy supporter, they're all right. It can be simple things why they want to take their lives, but it's really about having someone there to listen to them. Isn't that amazing? That because people aren't there for other people, and when a person's going through a crisis, that leaves the person bereft and they become suicidal. It's all about people in our society. Our society, technological society, is based more on money, capitalism and so forth, and we've got away from the ethic of our brother being our keeper, the ethic of love, the ethic of understanding. It's become a very complex society. I'm not telling you anything, am I? So. Okay, so there are 3 persons involved in the buddy support process. the helper, the helpee, and the wise leader or supervisor who uses a debriefing model for accountability. So you find a supervisor in a person's life. It could be a pastor, it might be a doctor, it could be an uncle. So you've got the helper, the helpee, okay, the buddy supporter, the helpee, and the supervisor in that person's life. And generally, we have the process of suicide first aid. I'll just give you a quick overview of this. Suicide first aid. And how we practice that is, one, we connect. So we connect with the individual. Okay. Two, we affirm their reasons for living. Affirm. So the reasons for living has to outweigh the reasons for wanting to take their life. And so you'd ask questions like what, when, where, how. How's this going to affect your family? Okay. It's going to have devastating consequences on those around you. This is practiced by all practitioners today. It's what they call suicide first aid. So they connect, they affirm reasons for living, because a person's reasons for living, as you can understand, has to outweigh their reasons for dying. Okay, and then put in place safety plan. Put in place safety plan. That means you work with the individual and you set up a contract. You won't take your life if we work on your behalf and we find someone to help you tomorrow. I can get a doctor for them, or help them with some agency who can help them through their problem. Okay, so this is a process that people can use, and it's very effective. Some people say, well, if you bring up suicide to the person and confront them on it, well, they could go ahead and do it. But the point is they're going to do it anyway, because if they've got it in their minds, that's what they're thinking of. And so it's a life and death struggle today, and you have to cut to the chase. Because some people, unfortunately, won't be around tomorrow if they're dealing with issues. So it is a very serious business. Okay, next. Then we go on to the grief facilitator in our Rainbow Ribbons Buddy Support Trauma Recovery Program. And they help people deal with real issues in relationship to grief, taking them through the various stages of shock, denial, depression, acceptance, hope. So people who deal with grief and loss, no matter what it is, are at various stages of going through shock, denial, and sometimes they go back into denial again, depression, because before they work through to acceptance and hope. And the issue is today in our society is there's very few grief counsellors. But people who have to deal with real issues, people who are suicidal, people who have unresolved issues. And I find this amazing because I went to all the agencies and I says, where are the grief counsellors? And there have been very few grief counsellors. Got victim support. So what it means is when people are stuck in their grief and they're working through issues, there's no one to help them work through those issues. So it's a terrible indictment on our society, but I don't want to get negative, I've got to be positive here. And we talk about talking therapy, the need to talk about the issues. And that's why it's wonderful with an organisation, when you come together like this, you joke and you talk and you communicate where you're really coming from. And so people need to talk about their issues. They need to bring things out that are really hurting them, their emotional problems, their family problems and so forth. Okay, think, feel, process, deal therapy, helping people to journey through their issues, resolving and coming to terms with their grief and loss. We're looking at a whole new paradigm. Before it was the practitioner, the doctor, the professional counsellor. Now everyone needs to start owning up to what they're going through in life. Because life has become very serious today. Okay, also helps people transform physical bonds of attachment to spiritual bonds, journeying their lost loved ones on establishing new links with them. Now that might sound a bit strange, but what it means is if you don't work through the stages of grief when you lose a loved one, you become stuck and you don't go on to transforming bonds of attachment. In other words, you don't form a spiritual link with that person. And in New Zealand here, it appears that a lot of us haven't, when you talk to people about their loved ones and so forth, they haven't dealt with the issues. It's something that happened 20 years ago and they haven't resolved for it. So we're at the beginning of a whole new paradigm of the need to deal with issues, face up to things, helping people to journey through their problems and so forth. Okay, and put in place a crisis intervention safe place where first response frontline workers can go out to those in distress. It means you'd have one central place and you'd have 2 workers who could go out to people who are suicidal. And so I talked to the police, I talked to agencies about the need to put these crisis intervention safe places in place for people. I'll get Lars to share a little bit on buddy support and grief facilitation now. Just like to come forward, Lars. Okay.
Well, I got involved with this quite some time back because I could see that they were going down, instead of following a classic viewpoint that you get in the medical industry a lot, where it's the doctor must do all this, not the individual. And I thought, well, the concept of people, the community being involved is good. Most of us here have probably got some sort of support network around us that we don't realise exists. I was listening before when you were talking about that guy that's in hospital, and a number of people talking about visiting him. That's a support network. The people that pull together and go in to visit someone or are there to take it in turns so that he's got visitors spread out over the days or weeks that he's going to be there, sort of thing. And suicide works, I think I mentioned it to one of you guys here, suicide prevention works in a similar manner. And this is where the buddy support part comes in the fact that most people who are contemplating suicide, because it falls into 3 sort of categories: dealing with it after someone's committed suicide, dealing with the emergency situation on the cliff face, so to speak, and dealing with the in-between bit, those people that have said they want to commit suicide or that they're thinking about it. And that's where the problem occurs, because often people in that situation pull away from society a bit, and it's often not noticed. They still turn up for work, they still turn up for school, this sort of thing, but you find, for instance, that they are less enthusiastic to be involved in things, like to start, just taking this as an example, they may turn up to the meetings but not get involved in things outside the meetings. Then at some point they stop turning up to every meeting. There starts to become quite distinct gaps, followed along by other signs. Now, when someone pulls away from society, and they've said, "Oh, I'm thinking of killing myself," or they've talked about those sorts of things, often people pull in the opposite direction because they don't know quite how to deal with it, right? And what needs to happen is for the people around them to form a comfort zone that supports them and takes it in turns to keep them involved in things, because when someone starts to get a stronger and stronger feeling that they're not part of a community, that's when things get worse and worse and worse. And I've often suggested to people to get involved with groups like this, because one of the things that's deep set inside people is that feeling you get when you help others, when you help, I don't want to be ageist here, when you help an old lady across the street or you hold a door open for someone, or you help someone cut up some firewood, or whatever it happens to be. There is a sense of satisfaction, but the trouble is with people who are going down the suicide track, if they get too far down that, they find it hard to get involved, because then they start to get concerned about, oh, these people don't want me involved, and all this sort of thing. But if people are there saying, oh, we're cutting up some firewood this weekend, come along and give us a hand, or we're doing something or other else, or oh, I'm mowing the guy next door's lawn, do you want to come and give us a hand? The satisfaction someone gets from that pulls them back from the edge. And for a lot of us, because we're all here, we've probably got some sort of group like that works automatically, independently, without any real effort. It's just an automatic thing because of the way we are. But there are people out there who don't have that there, and as soon as they stop putting in, there's no one there to keep them involved. As soon as they step back from the people they're in contact with, there's no one there grabbing them and pulling them back, right? And the buddy support concept is basically to create that ring of people that, if they don't have a natural good buddy support system there, then to create one. If they've got sort of one that's a bit wobbly, to sort of add a bit of support to it and keep it moving. And for a lot of people in those situations, if they've never confronted this, sometimes they just need a bit of help on how to provide this ongoing support. What do I do? What things can I do? And they don't realise it's something as simple as saying, oh, come round for dinner on Monday night, or oh, we're going off to chop firewood. Come round for lunch before we go out, or whatever it is, or come round for lunch afterwards, or this sort of thing. The classic thing with a lot of churches is you see good groups in some of those where people go from a church meeting to lunch afterwards, so there's like a fellowship carrying on. And once you point this out to people, they see, oh, okay, it's not as complicated. Anyone can do it. All you have to do is sort of think, okay, so-and-so seems a bit down in the dumps. Oh, come round for a cup of tea, or whatever it happens to be. It might be just, oh, I'm heading down to the pub later, do you want to come and join us? Those sort of simple actions do a lot to provide that support people need, and they're very easy to do. Often they don't require a lot of cost or work or anything, but it's just knowing that those simple things, like smiling at someone. Smile's free to give away. He's given me one now. It's free to give away. Doesn't cost you anything, but the effect it has on other people is dramatic. And when people realise that, then they can start to go, oh, well, I can take ownership of helping someone step back from the cliff.
Thank you, Lance. That's good. Okay, I'll take questions now, so we can get some feedback over what I've shared so far. Okay.